C'est a little remercier à notre amis qui sont à Mallorca. Et vous êtes tous français cet week-end. Alors
tu fais en français.
Je ne crois
We
pas.
know that. You speak well.
Mais je peux prouver. That's not the right word, right?
It's cool, tu peux prouver.
Quelquefois.
Essayer. You want to try?
Try.
Yes, essayer.
Essayer. Ok, je peux essayer quelquefois. Ok. But that was nobody laughed. That was very nice of you.
We got them sent.
Oh, good. Very sneaky. Okay, so there's nobody who doesn't know me, so I'm just gonna flip right through these. Please note that coming up this year, we have some really cool things for those of you who have been around a while. Tanya Tyre is going to be in Barcelona for the internal geometry, preconception and pregnancy stuff. I say if you've been around a while because you have to have gone through the full series of the geometry for that. And if you are looking to take amazing care of yourself and you need a break from your life in Paris, or Lyon, or wherever you are, please come to my island and let us take care of you. Pam Jarbo is coming. She is an amazing coach. And we are going to spoil everybody for 5 entire days. We have a private chef. Everybody's going to get adjusted. We have the sea. We have the lake. We have hiking. We have chamomile blooming. We're going to put the tables out in the middle of the chamomile. And it's going to be so cool. And so my goal is for everybody to have just every day like a sensory overload delight, sort of sensorial orgasm for 5 days. And then in September, Valerie Pinacchio, who is an incredible teacher and toggler, she is going to be doing a 2-day seminar in Bournemouth on toggle and BGI and using a BGI approach with toggle. She's amazing. And when you watch the way she sets up, it's like, and this is open to people who haven't necessarily completed any BGI courses. So it can be somebody who's just interested in learning more about toggle. And I can't imagine a better person to learn from if you know nothing about BGI or toggle, and just to get that full immersion. And then in Barcelona, Katina is coming from Massachusetts. She's incredible. She'll be doing her multi-dimensional osseous adjusting seminar. And then, so that's Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And then on Monday and Tuesday, we're going to do sacred geometry tourism through Barcelona. And we're going to just, it's going to be awesome. So we're going to go to some gardens. We're going to adjust out in the open. We're going to go meditate. And all as part of the BGI community. So it's going to be super cool. Okay, there is a vitality, a life force, an energy, a quickening that is translated through you into action. And because there is only one of you in all of time, this expression is unique. And if you block it, it will never exist through any other medium and will be lost. The world will not have it. It is not your business to determine how good it is, nor how valuable, nor how it compares with other expressions. It is your business to keep it yours, clearly and directly, to keep the channel open. Whether you choose to take an art class, keep a journal, record your dreams, dance your story, or live each day from your own creative source, above all else, keep the channel open. And we always start out the anterior geometry with this quotation because for me, it's about finding who you are, and it's reminding me and us that BGI is not a technique. You don't have to do it like anybody else does it. You have to do it the way it makes sense to you. And if you are doing it like somebody else does it, it's like wearing somebody else's shoes. It just doesn't, it's not comfortable. So please take time this weekend and over the next few weeks to figure out how you can make it more yours. And the more you it is, the more amazing it's going to be. Over this weekend, we're going to cover a lot of stuff, and some of the stuff is going to be different from what I So tonight we're going to go over a little bit of neurochemistry, the electromagnetic field, chaos theory. Of course, we'll put in a bit about our evolutionary theory of subluxation and sacred geometry. And then over the weekend, we are going to be completely immersed in the anterior system. So we're going to spend a lot of time palpating. One of the best things that has come out of dividing the anterior and the sagittal geometry is that we have time to do some really fabulous tonal organ palpation. And it's been, the feedback that I've gotten on it has been extraordinary. So that's really cool, and we'll have plenty of time to do that. We will go over continuity in the anterior system. It's a lot like the posterior system. It's more subtle. So for those of you who have been practicing a bit over the last few weeks or months or years, you'll notice it feels very similar to the posterior system. The concept is the same. It's more subtle because of course the anterior system doesn't have all those really intense muscular postural tracts that we have in the posterior. Subluxation tracts on the anterior system also are going to be a little bit more subtle, and there's a completely different resonance in it. So that allows us to tap in sometimes, if we want to the emotional component of the tracts, as well as the organ component of the tracts. So that will keep us busy, and it's pretty fascinating. We'll talk about focal points on the anterior system, which are very similar to the posterior system. We'll talk about force application and specificity and the integration of the adjustment, of course, and all of our geometric correlations. Then, in theory, we're going to be talking about pregnancy, a bit about infertility and miscarriage, pregnancy, childbirth, breastfeeding, all of those things. What's very interesting is that usually I kind of have, this is how babies get born, just in case you haven't ever seen that. This is exactly what happens.
Wait.
You just sneeze and there it goes.
Wait.
It's just gonna keep going. And so usually we have a couple demo people come in so that you guys get your hands on somebody who's pregnant, and we can feel the structures that we've been talking about. If any of you happen to see a pregnant woman in the next 24 hours, grab her. Bring her on Sunday morning. Don't let her out of your sight. Don't do anything illegal. Be really nice. But see if you can get her to come in. So we're working on a few, but also I believe in serendipity, and I believe that everything happens the way it's supposed to. So if it's not supposed to happen that we have somebody who's pregnant, it means that we're going to focus on other organ stuff. So I imagine that in Paris, people have a lot of lung stuff, a lot of liver stuff, a lot of stomach stuff. So if you have anybody that you love who you want to bring in that we can work on, please get a hold of them. Tomorrow afternoon or Sunday morning, we'll figure it out. But that would be great to have some extra bodies in the room. Okay, so we're gonna jump right in.
I can make a really big stomach.
You can, and I have a really big stomach. But it's a different resonance, and we can even do that. You can come in and show that you've gotten pregnant, and then we'll be able to tell what a real pregnancy feels like versus a fake pregnancy. Very
Sometimes
useful.
I can be a signal.
Wheat. Little wheat, little dairy. Okay, so in America, this is what old schoolhouses look like. They're little old rail buildings, and the children all went to school there. So this is what it looked like in the 1800s, way back when. So, and then there's an expression in English when we say something is old school, meaning it's the way it used to be way back. Sometimes it's kind of cool, but most of the time it's just outdated. And so what I'm trying to express here is that so much of what we're taught, both in chiropractic and in the world in general, is completely outdated and not serving us any longer in moving forward. So one of those things is Newtonian physics, which certainly has some valid concepts, but they're no longer getting us to where we need to go if we're studying the human body, because we understand that the body doesn't work in a completely Newtonian or linear fashion. It's based on quantum mechanics, and so there's a huge difference. In the same time frame, everything was built into fear and competition. Now, I would love to say that we've completely moved away from a fear and competition model. Unfortunately, I don't think that we're quite there yet. However, if we look at the visionaries, who I think most people in this room and a lot of chiropractors are drawn to, there are people who are not focusing on fear and competition. There are people who are talking about love and cooperation and coexistence and interconnection and our interpersonal relationships and the importance of being connected. And when we go into a spiritual realm of any spiritual discipline, the common theme that runs through all of them is our interconnectedness and the complete lack of separation. So when we talk about fear and competition and how I am better than you, or he is better than she is, or that bear is better than the old model of the bear, it's breaking things up into separate ways, and it's a way of creating distance and separation, and it's never going to get us where we want to go. In this model, we break things down into separate and small quantities to study further. So in chemistry, it's about studying the atom. But once we study the atom in a quantum fashion, we understand that the atom is just the beginning of the next galaxy. There's so much beyond the atom. And when I was in high school, I put my hand up one day and said to the chemistry teacher, "There's no way this is all it is." And she said, "This is all we know about, but I would love to learn from you eventually." And I wonder if she's still alive. I should invite her to one of my lectures. That would be fun to have her. Mrs. Fuller, she was awesome. So in chiropractic, what does that mean? It means it's all about the vertebra. It's about the bone. It's about the nerve. It's about the nerve system. It's about the spine. And okay, that's good for old school chiropractic. It's not enough for where we are capable of going and where we are well on our way. And in math, it's about accounting. It's about making sure that your numbers add up rather than looking at the patterns and the way things all play into each other and the interconnectedness of things. So I'm going to do a little bit of back and forthing of old school versus new school. So here we have our Sir Isaac Newton and the apple dropping from the tree, and he says an object in motion tends to remain in motion set along a straight line unless it's acted upon by an outside force. So gravity is still true, right? We know that gravity is true. We're not taking anything away from him. We're just saying that things have changed a little bit. And here's what they're changing into. They're changing into an understanding of our interconnectedness through the galaxies, through the cosmos, through the cell, and us as humans somewhere in the middle of that spectrum. And that things don't only move in straight and predictable lines. That chaos plays a big part of it, and things that we thought made absolutely no difference because they seemed so minute and unimportant actually are critically important. If we look at a garden, so in the old days, we used to take a garden and take all the weeds out, have everything separated, right? And everything would be, it was like you had to wall things off from another. And then you would put your weed killer, you would put your bug killer, you put everything that you could to kill everything that was not your plant. And then we would eat it and we would wonder why we would get sick. And now there's the concept of permaculture and the concepts of organic gardening and about coexisting, and that we understand that the way one plant interacts with another is beyond our human comprehension. And when you guys come to visit us in Pantelleria, if you spend a day in our garden, it's fascinating to talk to Peter, who spends a lot more time in the garden than I do, because when I'm gone, he's in the garden a lot. And his observations on ants and on if one broccoli plant seems to start to look like it's dying or getting attacked by bugs, he leaves it in there because he's convinced that one broccoli plant basically makes a sacrifice to keep all the other ones healthy. And sometimes I think he's crazy. Well, lots of times I think he's crazy. But then I watch the way the garden unfolds, and it's absolutely true, and it's so cool. And the more time we spend in nature and observing the utter interdependence of everything, and how once you try and take one thing out, so like we want to get rid of the mosquitoes, and that act is unquestionably going to affect something else. And so we can move our garden from that to a place where everything is, I want to go on a field trip here. What do you think? BGI field trip right here. So the concept of the sacredness in the garden as well, so that everything is holy, everything is sacred, everything is welcome, and everything has a purpose. And understanding that even though we might not understand it, understanding that even though that didn't sound right. So appreciating that even though we might not understand the purpose of something, that we understand that if we believe in innate and universal intelligence, that of course everything does have a purpose. How many of you know people that have had their appendix or their adenoids or tonsils removed? Like the generation before everybody had their adenoids. Like you got a sore throat and they just ripped your tonsils out because they said, you don't need them. And really? That seems weird. We need everything else. Why don't we need those? They're just extra lymph stuff. Oh, well, lymph stuff seems important. Like, so, the appendix, now they're, actually, when I went to massage school, a long time ago, almost 30 years ago, my teacher's husband was old, so he was probably 50, and that's how almost old I am, that's alarming. So he went to osteopathic school because he wanted to be able to have a license to do surgery, because in America osteopaths are also, they have basically the same privileges as medical doctors. And he wanted to be able to have anybody come to him who had an inflamed appendix and actually do like a de-inflammation process if he had to do surgery to get the stuff out of the appendix, but to leave the appendix in. He said, that is going to be the only thing that I do, is just take care of appendixes, because they should stay there. There's no way that they should be coming out. And so he was in his 50s going back to school for 10 years so that he could have people leave their appendixes in. And now they're talking about doing everything you can. They'll give you antibiotics, they'll do everything they can to let you keep the appendix. Probably the whole time I've been.
I just don't do that right now, so maybe.
Okay, so ego, this is how it's been. We've had this idea that we as man are on top of the animal kingdom, we're on top of the plant kingdom, we have dominance, we are the leaders, right? We're on top of the hill, and everything that is alive is there to serve us. And now we're slowly moving into a model based on eco, so the ecosystem, so we understand the interconnectedness of everything. And suddenly our pyramid changes into a circle, the circle of life. And when I was living in New York, I went to see this woman give a lecture, and she was talking about the age of Aquarius, which I had no idea what it meant. I'm definitely not an expert, but what she talked about, which seemed so profound to me at the time, was how pyramid structures in the early 2000s had to collapse, because the pyramid structure was based on ego. Ego was based on a patriarchal system that had one person on top and all the little minions underneath, and that everything slowly was going to reform and rebuild in a way that was created more equity. And that is slowly happening. It's hard to watch because it's also painful. But so many of our pyramid structures, or structures that are based on an uneven distribution of resources, are being shifted. It's slow going, and when people are on the top, they're oftentimes not very comfortable down here. So these people are holding on very tightly. But I do believe that things are shifting and changing. And right after she gave that talk, the whole banking system fell apart in the U.S. And that created influence all over the entire world. The banks won. It's very little has changed, but something happened, and I feel like we're at a really critical part of the history of our universe right now, where things are changing. And Greg Braden beautifully talks about how it's like we're birthing something, and we don't. All we can feel right now is the pain of the process of giving birth, and we have no idea what's on the other side. And for those of us who can understand that we're going through that process, it's a little less painful and it feels a little more productive. But if you're not aware that that's what's happening, it's terrifying. I mean, imagine giving birth and not knowing that you were pregnant, and not knowing that there was going to be something amazing on the other side. So I feel like that resonates very clearly with me, that things are transforming and changing. And as we move from the ego to the ecosystem, it's a dramatic shift. Okay, this is from a French 20-minute film called Strolling Under the Skin, which is not in French, right? But it was made in France. You can find it on YouTube. It's incredible footage about the connective tissue. So, Strolling Under the Skin. Remind me, and I'm happy to put it up a link. It's a really good one, and it's 20 minutes. And I could probably show the whole 20 minutes, but there's no point in us doing that as a group. But like everything she says is so, so cool. No, come back.
This meant that we needed a new way of thinking, something posing the problem in terms of global dynamics, continuous matter, a theory involving the concept of a tissue continuum, in total contradiction with the traditional view of sliding structures. Briefly, the notion of stratification and virtual space. In vivo observation, or with electron microscopy after dehydration, showed that the Scology network in fact formed continuous matter composed of billions of tiny disorganized vacuoles apparently arranged in a fractal manner. It was pseudo-polygonal, but with a very special dynamic forming of volume of glycolicon, whose surrounding was composed of type 1, 3, 4, or 6 collagen fibers.
This is what we're feeling when we're in the soft connective
according to their anatomical location and the role they had to perform. In this chaotic, haphazard world, there was absolutely no geometric regularity, no linearity, just fractal chaos.
So you've all heard me talk about this, but I have a new little addition that I hope that you'll appreciate. There we go. Subluxation in the 20th century, our old school version of subluxation. You need that?
Can I recall?
Absolutely.
It's so funny.
It is.
Who did that?
Me. Well, Peter on my command. And then he said, "You're not really going to put that up, are you?" And I said, "Yes,
so
I am."
Funny.
But so here's where we're focusing on the.
I mean, that's
Nerve.
civilization. Civilization as it was described before.
That's right. Exactly. Not subluxation, but how it was delivered, how the message was delivered, that this is a subluxation. The mechanical, the focusing entirely on the bony structure, the wearing our white coats, and the scaring people. If you have subluxations and you're gonna die if you don't come into the chiropractor. So that.
Really, really funny.
Thank you. And so subluxation in the 21st century.
This is so beautiful.
Okay, just so you know, you've seen this like 5 times before, but you don't pay attention. So that's a good spot for you right there. We keep you there. That's good. That's good for her, right? Okay, but you haven't seen this. Okay, so it is inappropriate and inaccurate to apply Newtonian logic or understanding to living structures. Not only does it not work, it will never give us results that we seek. There's this medical doctor that we just found. He is so cool. And he's talking about structure and mechanics of the human body. And he is a orthopedic surgeon. And he started looking at bones and how bones are structured. And he said, the way we're taught, and if we look at it completely in a Newtonian way, there is no way that the human body can work. So there's obviously something else going on. So here he's talking about the human body. This is all based on Newtonian mechanics, as it would be applied to a column or a building built with rigid materials and standing in one place on solid ground. But humans and all biologic structures are mobile, omnidirectional, gravity-independent structures built of soft materials, foams, colloids, emulsions. Bone and wood are stiff foams like styrofoam. And mechanical law, as applied to these structures, may be different. It is impossible to explain the mechanics of a dinosaur's neck using standard Newtonian physics. What I had been taught during my residency training, it was by some of the top biomechanics people at the time, was the application of first-year college physics to biological structures, and particularly how it applied to the human frame. This has been and continues to be the accepted mechanics since first described by Borelli, a mathematician and Renaissance man, in 1680. Nothing has changed. That's terrifying. It's not good.
No.
And we wonder why traditional medicine that is not giving us the results that we are looking for. That's allopathic. It's based on old information and old understanding, and it needs to be updated. When we touch a segment of the spine or a part of the body, we have the opportunity to connect with every cell of that system and with the essence of that person. Using BGI's holographic awareness, fractal understanding, and vitalistic approach allows us to understand not only that, but how introducing a force of any kind into the system has effects throughout the entire system, not just on the segment where the force is applied. Most types of care, whether allopathic or natural, are based on outdated models of biology and chemistry, as well as a mechanistic concept of anatomy. These various approaches only see the visible and perceive the obvious. Again, we're not going to get to the next level if we keep using information that's out of date. So this was attributed to Buckminster Fuller. I'm not sure if he said this, but I like it. I don't trust words. I even question actions, but I never doubt patterns. So here's, this is something that we'll talk about more in the sagittal geometry, the torus pattern. Here we have the DNA, our chakras, and then all of our sacred geometry, platonic solids. It said that it was Buckminster Fuller. I have to do a little bit more research, but I like the picture.
Yeah. Oh.
Okay, and here we have some of our beautiful phi spirals, talking about patterns. We'll also go a lot more into spirals in the sagittal geometry. But okay, have you guys seen this video? No? So we'll watch a few minutes of it. I might have turned the volume off because it's horrible music. That sounds like something I would do. incredible, like how inconceivable each one of those things is by itself, and then we put them all together, and that's just a fraction of what happens in our human body all the time without us thinking about it. And somehow we feel like these really schematic visions of the body and its anatomy or its physiology somehow explain the whole picture. And we're weird for feeling like there's something else. So here's some fractals. Here's a liver, which we'll spend more time on, much more time on tomorrow. The moment an egg is being fertilized by a sperm, that person is pregnant. That person will come in tomorrow or Sunday. We must find that person. Okay, so if we're looking at a reductionist system, we start from the planet, we come to the ecosystem, and we come down all the way, and all of these things are separate. If, on the other hand, we're looking at a system of integration, we go in the opposite direction. And we look at the way that the atom applies to the planet. And I think really in integration, honestly, it's a cycle. It's the way the atom applies to the planet connects back to the atom. And the way the cell applies to the planet. And out here we would have the galaxy. We'll have to redo that one. The DNA is a multi-dimensional piece of divinity.
But he doesn't draw the electricity from a wall socket. He claims to generate it within his own body. It was nothing like any acupuncture I'd ever had. I was getting really powerful electric shocks and couldn't control my movements at all. He says that what he does is no more supernatural than an electric eel, which also knows how to harness its yin and yang energies.
Yin yang, positive and negative, my positive from here and my negative from here. And we meet together, this can get like electricity.
And is this because you're special? You have a special sort of
meditation every day.
Is meditation?
Meditation every day. It's like a yoga.
Wow.
But I studied about 18 years.
18 years?
18 years from my child people.
Can you project this energy through your hands only or through other things as well?
Like you can ask me, like this, there's nothing, okay? See my burn? Just like this.
Our sound recordist, Simi, was skeptical at first. Later, he told us that anybody could learn this. God had given us all the yin-yang polarity, but it takes discipline and meditation to awaken and control it. And you must be very aware of your emotions. This energy can be dangerous. It can kill as well as heal. Then he asked for our newspaper. Whatever he had done to our newspaper, It's how you'd healed my eyes that made me wonder. What do these people living in the shadows of the volcanoes still...
We'll have to have a movie night for you, sweetie.
Okay, so the restoration process with these EMF fields. The electromagnetic field responds before there is a conscious awareness. The EMF responds before the heart and the brain respond with an increase in activity. And the EMF will often respond with a stimulus that is actually too weak to affect the nerve system. The EMF will reflect changes with disease and health. Of course, a disease, you will see the disease in the field, or the disease will be reflected in the field. And the electromagnetic field will show changes before the tissue has actually fully healed. So it's like the EMF is our blueprint of where we've been and where we're going. And the EMF is something that we can certainly study and understand slowly. I feel like we're all getting a better understanding of it. So that's like the big field. Then we each have our own field, right? So Amy's field is my signature field. Marie-Agnès' field is her signature field. And in a healthy signature field, we have a balanced, coherent energy pattern that are present across the full spectrum of frequencies from extremely low frequency to extremely high frequency. And the graphs of the energy patterns are very smooth, shallow waves, evenly distributed throughout the frequency spectrum. If we have an unhealthy signature field, so if our individual field is unhealthy, we have deficiency patterns and hyperactive patterns, and the graph will show thick, jagged waves concentrated in either high or low frequency bands. And in deficiency type diseases, anti-coherent patterns are in the high frequency ranges with little or no activity in the low range. So our signature field is our very own field. And the concept of transaction during healing or an exchange of a healing application, the field and the individual do not react to the input, but they transact with it. So it's the difference of, for me, it's a difference of something coming from a more organic exchange versus me acting upon something. So it's nonlinear and it's less imposing one upon the other. That's the concept of transaction. I feel like BGI is a really good example of a way that is transacting between practitioner and person on the table. And in every transaction, we have 5 determining variables. So however you love to practice, imagine you going up to somebody and being with them, and you're applying your own way, whatever that is. So we have the field of the disease. We're talking about a person right now who's expressing a disease in their field. So it doesn't have to be, of course. So we have 1, the field of the disease. So imagine that person has a really intense L5 herniated disc, just like our picture, right? We have the field of the person. So that's the person who's on the table. Then we have the field of the practitioner. That's you. We have the field of the modality. That's you. That's the application of what you do to that person or how you interact with that person. And then we have a separate field, which is the field of you plus the modality that you're applying. Okay, so I talked earlier about wearing somebody else's shoes when you go to do BGI. If I were to take an ultrasound machine in my office, and somebody's like, I'm getting rid of this, do you want it? Not really. Oh, it's so great, you'll love it, you'll love it. Here, just take some gel and try it on your next 5 patients. Okay, so I've got people coming in now who have stuff that they think an ultrasound will help, right? So first I'm like, I don't even know what to do with these people. I'm not connecting with this. Then I've got the field of the person. Fine. I've got the field of the practitioner. I'm good with my own field. I've got the field of the ultrasound machine. Completely different than the field of me doing my thing. And then I've got the field of me with the ultrasound machine. It's it's not a simpatico field, right? Because I have no, like, I don't get it. I don't want it. And it's not my thing. Now, let's picture me walking up to somebody, our pregnant person who's going to be here on Sunday, and I get to show you guys how I am going to apply the concepts of BGI on that person. So the disease is that person's pregnancy, right? So I'm making a joke out of that. I need to change this word. This is taken from somewhere else. So I've got the field of the pregnancy. So super exciting, right? I've got the field of the person. That person is probably has some great feelings about being pregnant. Some maybe concerns, fears, whatever. Then I've got my field. I've got the field of BGI. So the field of BGI now has been building since the late 1990s. And let me tell you, one of the reasons why it is easier for you guys to learn this than it was for me to learn it is because the field is so much stronger. There is a clarity and a consistency and a clarity of BGI and what it means to practice BGI and what the principles of BGI are that is completely different when we were just trying to figure it all out. And then we have the field of me with BGI. So that's like me magnified because I get my field plus the BGI field. So if I were the person on the table, which experience would I rather have? Which one would I want to pay money for? That one, right? I don't want to pay money to go to somebody who's using a machine that they're not excited to use. If I go to somebody's office and they're like, you've got to come in here, I've got this new machine, it's awesome. Totally different experience, right? Then you got to come in here, I've got this machine, it's a piece of crap that somebody was trying to get rid of. I don't know how it works, but come in and I'll try it out on you, right? So what I'm thinking is that the reason that we don't have hundreds of pregnant women standing outside the door right now is it has not been sold properly. That they're thinking that it's a crappy modality with a crappy practitioner. Of all animals, so this is Valerie Hunt. This is the woman who did the experiments in the Mu room at UCLA. She lived to almost 100. Just a beautiful woman. Of all animals, it is the human who gravitates towards stress. It takes the organization of his field and in positive cases leads to greater coherency and higher refinement. This is what we're talking about with subluxations, that we gravitate towards situations that are potentially going to throw us into chaos because it forces us to grow. Either we're going to go into that situation and come out with an increased flexibility and increased coherency and a higher refinement of our system, or we're going to go into that situation, we're going to lock into chaos, and we're going to keep it in our system. That means that we've created a subluxation. Either way, we still have the potential of that experience stored in our system so that we can then release it once we get adjusted or do whatever that helps release that track. And I do believe that it doesn't necessarily have to be a chiropractic adjustment. If one does not respond successfully to stressful stimulation, the body suffers. So what she's saying is if you've got a whole bunch of subluxation tracts stored in your system, the body is not going to work as well as it is if you don't. So again, Sue Brown never said subluxations are awesome, go out and get as many as you can. She said if you have subluxations, and we all do, great, because that is a source of amazing potential for us to move forward in our growth and evolution as we release that potential that's being stored in your system. Okay, in 1910, D.D. Palmer wrote, "The cause of disease are traumatism, poison, and autosuggestion." What is missing from here that D.D. did not talk about? Subluxation, right? So he was looking at a bigger picture. The chiropractor looks upon the body as more than a machine, a union of consciousness and unconsciousness, innate ability to transfer impulses to all parts of the body, the coordination of sensation and volition, a personified immaterial spirit and body linked together by the soul, a life directed by the intelligence uniting the immaterial with the material. So we're going to talk a little bit about how that might happen. Candace Pert was a PhD who studied the effect of the opioid receptors. Actually, that was how she became famous. She wrote this book called Molecules of Emotion, and in the book she says God is a neuropeptide. And what's interesting about neuropeptides is that they are so incredibly important to the functionality of our body. Neuropeptides are responsible for emotions. The basis of memory is at the neuropeptide level. Neuropeptides are the cues to receive and repress emotions and behavior. The majority of our information exchange in the brain is kept in order by the specificity of the receptors, not the synaptic connections. So this is something that she discovered with the opiate receptors. And neuropeptides weave the body's organs and systems into a web which interacts with the external and internal environment. Love this one. So neuropeptides weave the body's organs and systems into a web. Over the weekend, that's the web that we're going to be accessing. Increased concentration of neuropeptide receptors are at all places where the information forms the five senses which are entering the nerve system. Neuropeptide receptors and their ligands are information molecules, the basic units of a language used by cells throughout the organism to communicate across systems such as the endocrine, neurological, gastrointestinal, and even the immune system. Overall, the musical hum of the receptors as they bind to their many ligands, often in far-flung parts of the organism, creates an integration of the structure and function that allows the organism to run smoothly and intelligently. Okay, so here creates an integration of the structure and function that allows the organism to run smoothly and intelligently. In chiropractic, we have been taught and we have been telling people that that happens solely and exclusively through the nerve system. And it's actually bigger than that. It's bigger than the nervous system. So it's not just the nerve. It's not just the spinal cord branching out into all of the nerves. It's our neuropeptides. It's our chemistry. So our dear Sue Brown, talking about her subluxation and chaos theory. This is called a new... Because I love it. So traditional physics of how momentum will create a response, right? These are bowling balls. Okay, happy, and yes, I'm going to turn it off because it's just going to keep doing this. Okay, so this. Thank you. Thank God you were here. So, if we go and put our thrust in a very clear direction, right? We know exactly the direction that the thrust is going to take. However, if there is the slightest deviation in the way we pull that first bowling ball back and it doesn't hit straight on, this is the type of a reaction that will occur. So it's got completely different curves and directions than a straight line, right? So now we're starting to move a little bit into chaos. So this is following that picture with just a slight deviation. So no longer do we have a straight line, but we have these beautiful turns and fiery sparks and all kinds of stuff. So, and with this, even the smallest action, so pulling that bowling ball just the slightest bit will have a huge consequence in its trajectory. So in a linear system, in Newtonian physics, A plus B equals C, and we have a straight line, right? It's predictable. We know what's going to happen. In a non-linear system, A plus B, we don't know. A plus B equals infinite possibilities. We don't know. So when somebody says, how long is it going to take for me to feel better? I don't know. I don't know. And if I tell you that I know, then we're both going to be disappointed. So what I like is to be honest with people and tell them that there are so many variables and different factors in their care, and that I get to spend such a limited time with them, that what I do is going to have a great effect on their life. What they do is going to have an even greater effect on their own life. And that helps me to bring that back into perspective, that it's really up to them as well. Okay, my route in and out of the jungle. So when I was in, I think, 4th grade, I was 10, they did a test to see who the smart kids in the class were, because they were going to take us into a separate group and give us different reading assignments and different challenges and stuff. And so they gave me this guy who gave me this test, and a lot of it was an oral test, and some of it was vocabulary, and some of it was, and the only questions that I remember from the test are the ones that I think I got wrong. And there's 2. And one I'm for sure I got wrong, and this one I think I was just thinking outside of the box, but I'm not sure it was fully appreciated by the test giver. So I was told that I went on a walk in the jungle, and I got back to the car and I realized that I didn't have my keys. Okay, so here's my route to the jungle. They basically drew a straight line in the jungle, and then they said, can you draw where you would go to find your keys? Now, what's funny is that I'm the kind of person who loses their keys all the time, so I don't know that this was, if I had that so strongly in my field that they just knew this was going to happen to me all the time. And this is what I drew. And the guy looked at me and said, what are you doing? Did you not understand the question? And I said, you said the jungle. And he said, yes. And I said, monkeys, they're going to take the keys, and I don't know where they're going to go. So it's probably going to be a lot more complicated than just taking the same path. So I got to hang out with the smart kids, but I'm pretty sure they thought I was crazy. But I think I was right. Prigogine. So we have our Russian-born Belgian physical chemist and Nobel laureate who worked on dissipative structures, complex systems, and irreversibility. These are all critical aspects of living systems. And he says that we grow in direct proportion to the amount of chaos that we can sustain and dissipate. So if we can grow, if we can be subjected to a tremendous amount of chaos, but through chiropractic adjustments, we're able to sustain and dissipate those, we're going to grow more, right? Complicated structures, like human beings, require more energy transactions to maintain their integrity. There have been studies that kids who lead a life that is just too easy, like they don't have to struggle, have a much harder time in real life than kids who have to get a job or they have to contribute to the family household. Their parents went through an economic crisis. They learn a little bit about how to do things differently. They're more engaged in the process of taking care of the family. They might have siblings. Kids that are only children who grow up in pretty cushy families tend to not do really well in life. I'm not saying this is what the studies say. Most of you, I'm sure, have read those studies about the kids in Japan who have extremely high rates of asthma. And they were like, what is wrong with these kids? and they realized that they were living in completely sterile environments. They had no pets, they were not going outside, they were not going in the dirt, and their immune systems were so unchallenged that they had no immunity left. And so when anything was exposed to them, whether it was a little bit of dust, a little bit of pollen, a little bit of peanut, they would go crazy. Yes, they were also highly vaccinated. And is that part of it, that we're making the immune system so easily trained that it doesn't have the ability to go into chaos when the input comes in of a virus or a bacteria and we don't know how to react, and so the reaction is worse than it could be? Don't know. Living systems can utilize energetic input to organize to a higher complexity. So imagine this is our adjustment, our energetic input, and we are helping the person organize to a higher complexity on the table. If living systems do not have input, they will express a greater tendency toward catastrophe and structured mutations. So on a gross scale, on a big example, imagine a baby that is in an orphanage who there are so many kids that they don't have time to really cuddle and hold the babies. What happens? Those children do not develop normal social skills, they do not develop normal language skills, and they are neurologically delayed and have problems throughout their entire life because they weren't given that input when they were a baby. So that's just one example. Input is critical. It's like, that's why kids are out touching everything, putting everything into their mouth, looking at it, feeling it, touching it. They want to interact with it, smelling it. And remember what we had up there earlier about how the neurotransmitters and the ligands, I'm losing it, the receptors are increased at all the areas where we have our five senses. Oh, that's exactly the same thing we just did. Okay. Brain, see, these are important to have a little bit of chaos in the slides because it keeps us getting more and more evolved. The healthy brain maintains a low level of chaos, which from time to time self-organizes to a simple order when presented with a familiar stimulus. Strange attractor simplifies to a less complicated strange attractor. When a new stimulus is given, the attractor becomes more complex. And this lasts only a short time because the unfamiliar stimulus becomes familiar and the brain habituates and learns. Then the attractor simplifies again. The proper balance of randomness catches the brain's processing by surprise and subverts habituation. It's the balance that forces our brains to experience the input as if for the first time, every time, no matter how many times it's been encountered. How many of you drive to work? Or, yeah, okay. And how many of you walk to work or school? Like you have a path that you go on every day, same path. How many times have you ever gotten where you're like to your office or to your house and you think, I have no recollection of how I got here. I don't remember the drive because it's the same every day. And so it's like you just go on autopilot, right? That's a little scary when you realize that. And what's happening is that the brain is so quick to adapt to stimulus that's the same every day that it's like, okay, house over there, I know it. Light up there, I know it. And so your brain is on automatic and it's processing at extremely high rates and quick rates. I had to take my Italian driver's test, and it was the hardest test I've ever taken in my life, which is hilarious because the American boards are pretty intense. And one thing that I learned, which was fascinating to me because it fits here, is that it's actually illegal. You know the little pine trees that people put on their mirrors, or the bobbleheads, or anything that's in your front or back window? Those are, that moves. They're illegal. And the reason why is because your brain, the first few times, it's like it draws your attention. You go, oh, what is that? Oh, it's the air freshener. Oh, what is that? It's the bobblehead. Oh, what is that? It's the bobblehead. What is that? It's a bobblehead. It's the bobblehead. I know it's the bobblehead, so I'm not even going to notice anymore. And what's dangerous about that, and the reason that it's illegal, is that when you're driving, it is critical that you notice movement that is unexpected, because it could be a kid running out into the road, it could be a pet running in, it could be somebody who's hasn't signaled and is doing something that you need to take action for. But if your brain is so used to seeing this movement that happens irregularly, then it shuts off because it's not paying attention anymore. It's been habituated. And so those things are actually illegal. For those of you who practice a technique which is very rigid and specific, where you do the same thing on every visit, for the people that come into your office, the first few times it's like, I'm going to get adjusted. Yeah. Oh, they're going to put me in side posture. You're going to put, cool. After the 20th time that they're doing the exact same thing, it's kind of like, I'm going to the chiropractor, right? It's boring. Why? Because it's not new. It's not a new stimulus that's going to change your experience. You have a preconceived idea of what's going to happen. And so for me, the risk of doing that in my practice is that I'm going to get bored, and then the person's going to get bored. So if I want to have a practice where I'm seeing people over a long period of time in different aspects of their life, I want to make sure that I am seeing them with new eyes every time they come in, not seeing them with a technique that's going to do the same thing on every visit so that they get bored, and most importantly, I'm bored and I don't want to come to work anymore. Order and chaos in life. If we have a heartbeat that is too regular, we have a loss of variability in normal background chaos, which pushes the system to a critical level, and fast periodic waves will pound the heart tissue and damage it. So we think that having a regular heartbeat is good. Well, it's good to some degree, but if it's too regular, it's really not good. A seizure is an attack of an abnormal, I don't like the way that looks, abnormally periodic order. I think it's abnormal regular periodic order. I'm gonna have to get back to you on that one. In leukemia, we have cyclical oscillations of white blood cell levels instead of chaotic fluctuations. How do we get chaotic fluctuations in our immune system on a regular basis? Because we are exposed to a virus, a bacteria, an allergen, and our immune system will have a reaction to it. So if it's an allergen, the IgE cells will go into full production and we'll have an allergic reaction. If we're exposed to bacteria, our mast cells, our macrophages are all going to go on alert and produce more white blood cell levels. But that's a chaotic fluctuation. It's based on what's coming in. It's not predictable. If we have a cyclical oscillation of the development of the white blood cells, that is leukemia. That's bad. In our immune system, as I said, makes Parkinson tremors, we have a loss of the normal chaos in our neurology. And in aging, we have there we go. Chaos is good. And see, that was unpredictable. So it's important that we have a little bit of unpredictability in there. Keep our chaos on board. Okay, I think that it is possible. So tensegrity. In architecture as in life, tensegrity is based on a series of triangles. So a tensegrity structure, the original biodesic dome, which this is an example of, is a grid shell with large amounts of triangulation. And they typically perform incredibly well structurally. I would say human beings perform very well structurally. We are also tensegrity models. These structures, are also highly efficient to manufacture, as their geometry is extremely repetitive. Now, in our structure, our geometry too is extremely repetitive. Organization exists in living organisms. Organization is not something fundamentally mystical and unamenable to scientific attack, but it is the basic problem confronting biologists. 1936. Some of these people were moving quickly ahead. Floating compression. This is what's the way they describe tensegrity in the human system. A term promoted by Kenneth Snelson. Each compressed member, such as struts or bars, do not touch among another, and the pre-stress tension members, tendons or cables, for example, define the system spatially. Snelson defines tensegrity as a closed structural system composed of a set of 3 or more elongate compression struts within a network of tension tendons. The combined parts are mutually supportive in such a way that the struts do not touch one another, but press outwardly against nodal points in the tension network to form a firm, triangulated pre-stress tension and compression unit. Triangulated networks are stronger and even more firm if compared to a non-triangulated network. And here is an example of our triangulated network. This is actually a design of blood vessels in a tensegrity model. Okay, we've all seen this, so I'm not going to show you this, but does everybody remember this image? Yes. Change your life, right? Wait till you see the next one. This one is so exciting. You've already seen it?
Yeah. I never know if people are watching.
I've got something in my pocket for you later. The end? I might. We'll see. I might not even show it.
Right. Yeah, see, look at that. Why?
Okay, so I picked this one because we're going to be focusing on the anterior geometry all weekend. So look at that. Look at the way the head is moving and the neck is moving and everything just by rocking the pelvis. And that is not in gravity. Like, he is not standing. Huh? No. Where might I put it? No, I have this. And I have people. Okay, thank you. I love that. Oh, it's so cool.
So we already know that. Okay. So here we go. If we have our adjustment delivered at the right spot,
This the entire system. Come on.
Hey, so thank you for watching. This took me like 25 hours spread over 8 days to build, and this is my third largest project I've ever built by myself. So if you liked it, be sure to hit the thumbs up, subscribe for more Donna videos.
Okay, now, if there had been a break in the middle there, what would have happened?
Like 25 hours lost.
25 hours left. Or an excellent example of a disconnect, right?
Also.
Maybe we should get one of her outtakes. Okay, so Carl Sagan is an American writer, and he was a scientist. And he wrote that the notion that science and spirituality are somehow mutually exclusive does a disservice to both. Vector equilibrium. Vector equilibrium is a concept which is in sacred geometry. It is also a concept that is in engineering, and it is in the physical structure as well. It is in our physical structure. And Buckminster Fuller, our geodesic dome guy, he wrote that the vector equilibrium is the zero starting point for happenings or non-happenings. It is the empty theater and the empty circus, an empty universe ready to accommodate any act and any audience. So it is literally infinite potential. And this is what it looks like if you were to map out a vector equilibrium. Here, he's going to explain it. He's hard to understand, so there's subtitles. But I think it's worth watching for the geometry.
Vector equilibrium, well, the radii have been removed. They have the explosives. And equilibrium is a very completely unstable condition. That is, when we first had submarines, we used to fill the water ballast tanks, so it was just an equilibrium.
Equilibrium, very precarious spot. And later he'll say nature abhors an equilibrium. And I just think that is so interesting, because I feel like a lot of us talk in our practice about chiropractic helping you to find balance and find your equilibrium, but nature actually is not very comfortable in balance or equilibrium. Because why? Because it's so dynamic. The second equilibrium represents a stillness, and the second we find that stillness, it's like there's going to be another thing coming in that the body has to react to. So for me, when I talk to people about equilibrium, I like to talk about a dynamic equilibrium, and that our equilibrium is always changing. And if we talk about posture, it's always going to reflect where we are at that moment, rather than looking at an ideal spine and what that might look like. Because that spine doesn't have kids, or that spine doesn't have a job. That spine's not sitting on its ass all day at a computer like this for 12 hours. So let's look at humans and how incredibly dynamic we are, and how our equilibrium and where our balance is constantly in a state of change.
And then if anybody happened to drop a monkey wrench over, we could throw the balance out and they would tend to nose over and get into radio trouble. When we began flying, then we came to what we call the stall. The stall is the point when, at the equilibrium, at the stall, anything can happen, can go at any kind of spin. Nature abhors that equilibrium. She always, everything you and I know will always be one side or the other of the equilibrium. At any rate, this is the most expansive form of these vectors that I gave you. Now here's vector equilibrium. Can everybody see this all right? And I'm going to take this top face and lower towards the face on the floor. And this top triangle is not allowed to twist. It can only approach the triangle on the floor. You've got two planes approaching each other. Understand? So this means this vertex will always be towards you. Yeah. And the vertex on the floor is towards me. So I'm going to do this. Suddenly, it's collapsed to where the square are changing. They become diamonds, then Bridgepole diamonds. Now the distance between the vertexes is such that the line is exactly the same as the other vectors. Therefore, I put in 6 vectors there and you have the icosahedron. This is the icosahedron. Vector equilibrium then comes down to the first stable form, which is the icosahedron. The vector equilibrium itself consisted of 8 tetrahedra, each of the volume of 1, 6 1/2 octahedra. Half octahedra is 2, so 6 and 2 is 12. 12 and 8 are 20. The vector equilibrium volume is 20. And so it now collapses. I want to say that 20ness of the vector equilibrium gets tightened up into the icosahedron with another set of vectors. 6 more introduced, or 1 more unit of quantum. Now I'm going to keep lowering that triangle, careful on the floor, not twisting at all. And now it suddenly contracts to become the octahedron. That's about a beautiful thing you watch. All vertexes approach common center at a common rate. There's absolutely symmetrical expansion, kind of bar up here and now contracts the other way. But the axis in my hands never rotates. Only the pole is rotating. Now I can go, supposing this is rotating in space, the stars, there's a mass attraction pull of another set of stars, and when then this is trying to turn, and then it restrains this. What happens when you do that would be then, I move this around, it forces it to contract. If it's being forced to contract that way, then remember, notice it's rotating this way. This rotates more and plunges right through and becomes the tetrahedron. We've gone all the way from vector equilibrium, icosahedron, octahedron, vector equilibrium. The octahedron is double bonded, tetrahedron is quadruple bonded. This is where diamonds are in respect to common. We have no point that we break open. So the maximum space employed by unity is a vector equilibrium, with all the structures that are within it. They're contracted form from the whole. Now notice that this can then tetrahedron. I had it plunge that through like that. This can then immediately lift itself and tetrahedron is turned inside out. Just does it absolutely spontaneously. Just basic pumping. Okay.
All right, so that's intense for a lot of it's a lot of information talking about big stuff. But think about how we've talked about how our triangles. So let's just talk about our posterior triangles, and we've mentioned that the posterior triangles actually do have a volume, right? So they come forward as a tetrahedron. And then our anterior triangles are going to come backwards as a tetrahedron as well. And so as we bring those two structures together, we're creating vector equilibrium through the entire system in a series of 6. We have a little Le Petit Prince. It's only with the heart that one can see rightly what is essential is invisible to the eye. So some of these things we are not going to see, we are going to feel, and we are going to feel them not only with our hands, but with our heart as well. Okay, so this is the hara, the energetic center of the body according to Eastern tradition, the cross section of a spindle torus, and Leonardo da Vinci's man. We have the torus, the Sri Yantra, the Merkaba, and the aura. And they're all basically the same thing. They're telling the same story, which is the ascent and descent from heaven to earth and vice versa. We have our fractal, da, da, da. Okay. Our posterior geometry. Structure, posture, very physical. It's a lower frequency and it is represented by the element of earth. The anterior geometry, emotion, organs, it's a higher frequency. Sorry, that one was my fault. And its element is water. So this is where we're going to be playing through the weekend.
What is the element for posterior?
Earth. Yeah. Okay. Our weekend schedule. Saturday, we're going to start at 8 a.m. We'll break for lunch. We'll have an hour and 45 minutes, 2 hours. And I'm hoping that we'll wrap things up around 6:30 or 7. It's going to depend on who comes and all of that. If we need to stay longer and you need to leave, that's fine. But tomorrow, what we're really going to be focusing on is the organ stuff and the anterior geometry. Then on Sunday, So on Sunday, we're going to start at 8 a.m. with the material. We're going to go through the pregnancy stuff. Then hopefully we'll have at least one pregnant person come in. We will take a short break and finish by 3, and then I'll adjust everybody at the end. Okay? So what I would like to do is do a little meditation specific to the anterior system. We can do it now or we can do it in the morning, as you prefer. If you guys are awake, we can do it now.
I'm starving.
You're starving?
For me, I won't be
Okay.
able to do it.
You want to do it in the morning? Morning? Okay.
Mornings
It's 10:30, so that's fine. Okay, then we'll do it in the morning.
And there is a lot of people not here.
That's right.
So,
You're just thinking for everybody else, right?
yeah.
Yeah, well, that's very kind of you. Okay, so that's fine. So we're going to start at 8 a.m. It'll take me about 45 minutes to go through the first group, and then so I'm going to adjust in here. What that means is that we have to be quiet because we have the